the speaker view instead of gallery view, you'll get to see Bryan instead of having to scroll around when he starts talking in just a minute. But I got to watch firsthand Bryan's journey of trying hard on the track as he was training in between earning the silver medal and the gold medal in the decathlon for the Olympics for Team USA. And it was a daily struggle. I can tell you he worked hard each and every day on that journey. And so, Bryan, thank you for joining us and looking forward to hearing your story.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, guys. Mandy, I've got to say, I was a little bit surprised because I thought I was coming to talk to a group of kids because the last time they were so little, the kids that you had on. And so I got on and I'm like, whoa, wait a second. Like this, am I in the right group? And I had to like search for your face and I was like, oh, okay, no, I'm in the right spot. So it's awesome to be able to talk to people that will probably be able to, at least remember some of the things that I remember when I was training, and this maybe some of the athletes that I looked up to when I was training, as opposed to, in fact, you guys might even know what my event was, which is totally different than most of the time when I talk to the younger generations that have no idea what event I did. They can't even remember the last Olympics because they probably weren't born yet. So, I'm looking forward to being able to share with you guys today and hopefully be able to, just have some open dialogue about some really fun things. I think, it's easy to think about yourself as just an athlete. But I can tell you that in my short 40-ish years of life, I feel like I've experienced, just a roller coaster of a ride, and it's been amazing to see what has transpired and to be able to look back. You don't often at my age get to look back on your life and look at what you've done and decide whether or not you think it was good and worth it, and then kind of still be able to look at the future and decide which way you want to go and how you want to direct yourself, as you move forward. So I'm looking forward to being able to share with you guys tonight, and appreciate you guys all giving me some time.
Okay, sorry, awkwardness of Zoom mute. So I think let's kick off, Bryan. We'll do a little bit of Q&A, and folks can chime in with questions on the chat window as well, and I can kind of help curate. But if you want to just talk a little bit about your journey from being a punk kid in Hawaii to being a gold medal athlete and some of the highs of that and lows of that journey. And then we'll let folks ask questions along the way too. And then maybe we'll shift it to kind of, how do you have that mentality in business today as well?
Sure. So I don't know if Mandy gave you guys any updates, but these are my little hardware. And I'm not in my gym, by the way. This is just one of those fake backdrops that my son put on for me. I've got a 15-year-old son, and I've got a 13-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old daughter, and my wife, Sarah, who I met at Azusa Pacific University, which is the alma mater for Mandy and myself, as well as my wife. And so he put this on for me, and when I do all my business meetings, it works great because everybody thinks I'm at the gym, and I tell them that I just did a workout and I had to jump into the meeting. But these are my Olympic medals, and I don't know if you guys have ever had a chance to see Olympic medals before. Sorry, they keep going in and out because of this stupid background, but that's what they kind of look like on the front. That is, if I can get it to work, kind of what they look like on the back. I'll do one at a time because I think it'll be able to focus a little better. So that's the back of the Athens medal, which was my medal, my first Olympic medal. And that's the back of the Beijing medal. Maybe you'll be able to see it. Maybe you won't, sorry. And the front of the Beijing medal. If you notice something real quick, just a little bit of Olympic history, on the fronts of the medals, they put the goddess Nike on the front. And so that's the kind of the goddess that you see standing there with the angel wings, if I can figure it out here. Sorry, this technology stuff. And I would take this backdrop off if I knew how, but I don't. So you're stuck with it. But that's the goddess Nike on the front. And then you can see the Parthenon and the original Olympic Stadium. The goddess Nike is the goddess of victory. It is where Nike got their name from. And so she is on the front of every Olympic medal since the beginning of time. And then on the back of the Olympic medals, they allow each country to kind of create the design of that medal that's specific to their country. And so on the back of the Athens medal, there's an ancient Greek saying that talks about the fact that when you win an Olympic medal, you're considered to be part God. And so I remind my wife that she is not only married to part God, but she is also married to one of the only titles that they give out at the Olympic Games. There's only two that they give out, and one of them is the world's fastest man, and the other is the world's greatest athlete, which is given to the winner of the decathlon, which is the event that I did and that I won. And so she is also married to the world's greatest athlete. So I think she's a pretty lucky lady. It doesn't get me out of any, housework or anything like that. And God put her in my life for a reason, along with my kids, and that is to ground me and remind me of who I am and what I stand for, and what's most important in life. But we have a lot of fun as we go through it. So just so you know, those are what the Olympic medals look like. The back of the Beijing medal is actually, if you saw, it's got some white jade on there. And the white jade is actually the rarest form of jade. And so all the gold medals had white jade. All the silver medals had a mixture of white and green jade. And then all of the bronze medals had just pure green jade, because that's the most common form of jade. And so that's kind of how they did that there. Anyways, how did I win those things? So I started out, I grew up in Hawaii. I was born in Texas. My mom and my dad were a kind of a mixed racial couple. My mom was Japanese. My dad was African-American. Born in Texas. My dad was in the military. He moved to, got stationed in Hawaii. My mom and I moved there when I was very young. My mom was from Hawaii. That was where all of her family was. And as I grew up in Hawaii, I grew up in a mixed race house. There was a lot of drug abuse and alcohol abuse and verbal abuse and physical abuse. That took me into, and I'm sorry that I'm going fast, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So you guys can have me kind of refresh if we need to at the end. But that, as you can understand, through the just the uncertainty and kind of the turmoil that was going on at home, created a bit of a product in me that where I only knew anger. I tell everybody that's the only emotion I knew. And so when I was watching things, it was like I didn't really know how to really enjoy something or to be happy about something. It really turned into that's fine, or that's boring, or whatever. And then the only other emotion I knew was that I got angry. And so when I was disappointed, I got angry. When I was sad, I got angry. When I didn't know what to do, or anxious, I got angry. And that started to create issues in school and with friendships and just in life in general. So from a very early age, I was running into a lot of issues. I tell people, not everybody knows this, but I do share it often. I was actually kicked out of kindergarten because when I was a kindergartner, I used to play with all the older kids, and so I knew the rules to like basketball and things like that. And I was a very competitive little kid. And so when I would play with kids my own age, they would come and they would grab the ball and they would just run with it, right? And it was like they would play keep away, and I'm sitting here going, wait, you can't do that. Like, you have to dribble the ball. But they wouldn't listen. And so I would become so frustrated and so enraged that I would run over and I would tackle them and I would bite them on the cheek. That was like my signature wrestling move. I'd, finish with a bite on the cheek. And so after doing this a few times, I remember going into the principal's office, and the principal sitting across from me, and many times being put on detention and having to go to the older kids' class and sit in the back and write and do my homework and all that kind of stuff. I remember saying, listen, if this happens one more time, we're going to have to ask you to leave. And she was talking to my mom. And sure enough, I went to school, same thing. Kid grabs the ball, goes running. I chase him down, jump on him, bite his cheek. And as I'm sitting across from the principal, for the last time, and she's looking at me, and she's just got this look of utter disgust on her face. And rightfully so. But she's looking at me and she says, Bryan, I'm really disappointed, and I'm going to have to call your mom, and you're no longer going to be able to come to school here, and your mom's going to be really upset, and blah, blah, blah. I was so angry that I took my fingernails and I scratched down my face and I peeled the skin down my face. And I remember the principal's look when she saw me do that. She sat there and she, mouth dropped open. She didn't know what to say. And she just looked, my mom answered and she said, listen, you need to come pick your son up right now. And I share that story because I always want people to understand like where the origins of where I started, right? Because I think it's really easy to look at the gold medals and the silver medal and, you know, maybe my book and all these things. And it's very, very easy to think, oh, he was born, you know, an Olympic gold medalist. He was born, you know, with his fate being track and field. He was doing what he was supposed to be doing, or his parents were, you know, famous athletes or collegiate athletes. And the truth of the matter is none of that was true, right? I was just this punk little kid growing up in Hawaii who had parents that were fighting and abusing drugs and doing all of those types of things, who eventually ended up getting divorced, and dragging their son into the courts to have to decide who he wanted to live with, to you know, basically becoming suicidal at the age of, you know, 5th or 6th grade, and my mom getting me involved in counseling. And the way that I got into track and field after all of this was because the counselor told my mom if she didn't want to find me dead or have me wind up in prison, that she needed to get me involved in some sort of sport. And so by the grace of God, my mom, you know, even though she was broken and didn't know what to do and just exhausted spiritually, mentally, emotionally from all the chaos that was going on in her life, she gave me the option of either swimming or running track and field. Because in her mind, those were the only 2 sports that didn't require me to touch anybody else. I had to stay in my lane. If I went out of my lane, I was disqualified. If I couldn't blame anybody else for not doing well. It was on me. Either I ran fast or I didn't. Nobody else could affect me. And so she said, listen, you can swim or run track and field. And I always say the joke was I was deathly afraid of wearing Speedos. So track and field was the sport that I went to. And it didn't matter anyway, because as Mandy can attest, we wore spandex all day long, every day. And that's what we, you know, that's what we like did life in. So it was basically the same thing. But that was my story getting involved in track. And again, I share that not to talk about how rough life was or anything like that, but just to shine a light on, you know, the journey that some of us go through isn't always the journey that you think it is when you look at the finished product, right? When you look at the finished product, it's so easy to ignore everything that comes before it, but there's a lot that happens before that to get you to the point. Some good, but not all the time. And so that was my early childhood. That of course moved and kind of went into my parents getting divorced, really ugly divorce. My mom, you know, not having graduated from college, or only graduating from high school and not having a college degree, not having her driver's license at the time, to us being on welfare and trying to figure out how we were going to make it, to me going into junior high school and being kicked out of schools and being arrested and those types of things and getting into fights. My mom got remarried soon after the divorce. So now I had a Japanese mother, an African-American father, and a Caucasian stepdad, that just created all kinds of issues, right? When you're looking at your parents and trying to identify with your parents and having a history with your parents, and then all of a sudden somebody else coming in and kind of throwing a wrench in all of that. And so you can imagine as I got older, you know, my stepdad and I just kind of butting heads and really, you know, having a rough time, and then that creating even more unbalance in the household. And so then going into school and other places in life and acting out even more. But luckily, the one constant at that point in my life was track and field. And so while all of this was going on, I was continuing to run, got into high school, and started to realize that I was doing fairly well at this track and field thing. It was something that kept me popular. It was something that the girls really liked. So it was, you know, it was kind of cool. And so I stuck with it. But as I was starting to get into my track and field years in high school a little more, I met my coach at the time, and he became kind of like a third father for me, a third father figure for me. And as I began to become closer and closer to my coach, Coach He, I remember I would have trouble with my parents, and they would call my coach, and most of the trouble would stem around this idea that my mom would say, listen, Bryan, you're a leader. you are someone that people follow. And so you need to, hold your self to a higher standard. And I would hate that. I absolutely hated it. And I would say, I don't want to be a leader. I don't want anybody to follow me. I just want to be able to do what I want to do. And I don't want anybody to care. And so we would get into these battles all the time about, my commitment to my team, and, why I couldn't go out on Friday nights or Saturday nights to go to parties and things like that, because I had a track meet the next morning, that sort of thing. And we would just battle. I'd run away from home. I'd quit the track team. And every time I would quit the track team, she'd say, listen, if you want to quit the track team, that's fine, but you call your coach and you tell your coach yourself. Right. And so I would call my coach, because I was one of those guys that was like, I'm not going to let my mom one up me and kind of back me into a corner. So I'd call my coach and I'd be like, listen, Coach I'm quitting. I'm not on the track team anymore. And he would just say very calmly, like, Bryan, I totally get it. That's fine. Why don't you come out to the track tomorrow so that we can just discuss it? And then sure enough, I'd go out to the track and he'd talk me back into being on the team, right? When I was able to calm down. But one of the things he told me as I was showing up to practice one day was he said, Bryan, listen, life is crazy right now. He said, I get it. And he knew all the things that were going on in my life and how crazy everything looked. And he said, but what I want you to know is that there's nothing during this time right now where you're at the track. There's nothing that you're going to do to be able to change that. So he said, just give yourself this hour and a half or 2 hour practice, this 2 hour window. Just give yourself this window and let it be something for you. And he said, I want you to start practicing coming to the track and standing at the gates of the track and imagining all of these heavy issues that you're dealing with just melting off of you. And he's like, and when you step onto the track, let that be your time. And he's like, I promise you, when you're done, you'll be able to think more clearly. You'll be able to take on all of these challenges with a clearer mind and a better attitude and just kind of a reset. And so I'm a very literal person. And so I began doing that. I would literally show up to practice right afterwards. I'd bounce out of my study hall that was before practice. I'd get there a little bit early and I'd stand at the track and I'd close my eyes and I'd envision all these things that I was being troubled with falling and melting off of me. And I would go out and I would run. And I would run and I would run and I would run and I would just run myself into the ground, and I would run until I couldn't stand up anymore, until physically I just didn't have the strength anymore, and mentally and emotionally and spiritually, like I just didn't have the strength to fight anymore, because that's what life felt like. It felt like I was constantly in this battle to have to prove that I was good enough, to have to prove that I was, that I was worthy enough of love, that I was good enough to be liked, to all of those things. And I was so tired of it. And so I would run myself until I just couldn't do it anymore. And there was a freedom for me in doing that, getting myself to a place where I just had to give up and understand that some of these situations and things that I was going through were just not in my control. And I had to just kind of give up when it came to those scenarios. And so, as you can imagine, I always say the track became my sanctuary. It became the place where everything just felt good, right? It's the place where all the weight of the world was lifted off of my chest, and I felt like I could breathe. Some of you probably have watched this movie. Some of you may not have, but my mom made me watch this movie, Chariots of Fire. And I remember I did not want to watch it because it was going to be black and white and all this stuff. And I was like, Mom, are you kidding me? This is going to be the worst movie on planet Earth. Like, I can't believe you're making me watch this. But I did. And it was one of the greatest movies I've ever seen, right? And in that movie, Eric Liddell, who's kind of the star of the movie, has a quote. And he says, when I run, I feel God's pleasure. And that stuck with me, because for me, when I ran, I felt God's pleasure. I felt like everything in the world was lined up just right. And I felt like, my dad was looking down on me from up in the heavens and looking at me and saying, good job. And there's nothing better than that, to have your dad say, good job, especially for someone whose real dad was gone, whose stepdad he didn't get along with, whose grandfather was this strict Japanese guy that would kick him and hit him with 2x4s if things weren't absolutely perfect. And so it just became this place where I just wanted to be more and more and more. And so that's what I did. I continued to run, and I continued to pour myself out, and I continued to go harder and harder and harder. And because of that, I got better and better and better. And track and field became a tool that I was able to use to get out from, this oppressive life that I didn't want to be in, right? Which I say that with a smile, because it really wasn't oppressive. It was just in my head that it was oppressive. But it was an opportunity for me to get out from under my parents', rule, which is what I really wanted at the time. And so as I did that, scholarship offers began to come into the door. I went to the state meet. I kind of got my act together just enough that I was able to get decent enough grades and score just high enough that I was on my SATs, that I was just eligible for the NCAA, and scholarships started to come in. I got scholarship offers from schools all over the country: Ivy League schools, Division I schools, Division II schools, Division III schools, NAIA schools. And my mom had heard about this one small school, and she had heard about it from a friend, and she said, listen, I want you to go to this school. And I said, absolutely not. It was an NAIA school, so not Division I, Division II, or Division III. So I was like, no way, I'm going Division I. It's the only way it's going to happen. And she was like, well, I want you to go to this school. And I remember telling her, I said, listen, I'm not going to an NAIA school. Like, I've got University of Florida, I've got USC, I've got UCLA, I had Cornell, Brown, like some of the Ivy League schools. I had all these schools offer me scholarships. And I said, you didn't have to sacrifice. You're not the one who put in all the hard work. So you don't get to say where I go. I said, I'm going to choose where I want to go. And if the problem is all the money that you spent on shoes for me when I was, coming up through this, I said, when I make it and become famous, I'll write you a check for the shoes that you bought me. So I wasn't the nicest kid, but she kept, doing what moms, I think, do best, which is she just nagged and nagged and nagged and nagged until I finally gave in and said, okay, listen, I will make this one small school, Azusa Pacific University, my first visit. And after that, I said, I don't want to hear anything else about it. We set up a trip. The school couldn't fly me out there. Mandy knows this. Like, my coach, Kevin Reed, was this, kind of middle-aged guy who, was kind of a track dork and just knew all the track and field stuff and was not cool at all. But I went to Azusa Pacific University, and I had the worst kind of attitude about it. It was also a small Christian school, so I knew that I was going to have to go to chapel 3 times a week, and that the kids were probably going to hang out at church on Sundays for fun, and I wasn't really looking forward to that. But as I got there, and as I started to visit with the community and understand who the school was, there was some sort of peace that came over me on my visit. And before I left, I signed my letter of intent. I canceled all of my other trips to all the other schools, and Azusa Pacific became my choice of school to go to. And it was probably one of the best decisions that I made in my entire life. And from that point on, I got to school there, and the first 2 years there kind of continued down the path I was on. Made a lot of bad decisions, got into a lot of trouble while doing that. Met a girl, and we started dating my freshman year. Learned a ton of lessons that I'm going to fast forward through, and I can answer later if there's questions about it. But fast forward through, qualified for my first Olympic team, or I should say world championship team, when I was there at the age of 21. Qualified for my first Olympic team at the age of 23. Won my first Olympic medal at the age of 24. Won my second Olympic medal at the age of 28. Won a few world championships and things like that in between there. Few #1 world rankings and U.S. world rankings, but just an amazing time there that led me to where I am today. And one of the things I wanted to do before I open it up, Mandy, to some questions, is I just wanted to share a small story. When I was at the Olympics, it was the 2008 Beijing Olympics, and as you can imagine, this is the biggest day of my life, right? I mean, I don't think it was more important than my wedding, but on a scale of stress, it was up there, maybe even surpassing like the amount of stress that I felt, for my wedding and just the craziness that happens around weddings. But I had the weight of the world on me. I had, I wasn't trying to just be the best in Hawaii, or in my little town, Kaneohe, or the town that I was living in, Glendora, California, at the time. I wasn't trying to be the best in the state of California or the best in the US anymore. I was trying to be the best in the world. That means one person out of 7 billion people. I was trying to be the best at what I was doing. And in the entire year leading up to this competition, I had ABC News and NBC News and People Magazine and all these people in my house filming my family, filming me out on the track, watching us train. I mean, interviews happening left and right, and they all wanted to know if I was going to win the gold medal and how I felt, and they all expected me to win the gold medal. And not just that, but all of my sponsors, right? I had BP and BMW and Nike and Visa, and all these massive companies that had commercial campaigns out and all kinds of stuff. They were all riding on me winning this gold medal. And so, as you can imagine, it was just, it was the pressure was almost paralyzing. I mean, it was literally like, if I stopped and thought about it, it was like I just wanted to curl up in a ball in a dark room and make everybody go away, because just trying to handle that is more than you can bear. But I had trained myself for this, and so I was in Beijing, and we had been there for about a month before my competition, and I knew exactly how my day was going to go. Right, I knew what time I was going to wake up. I was going to get up at 4:30 in the morning. I knew what the weather was going to be like. I knew the direction that the wind was going to be blowing. I knew that it wasn't going to be raining, but it was going to be nice and cool, about 72 degrees. And I had everything in my head. And for the last 4 years, I'd been playing out every single aspect of both of my competition days, all the things that could go wrong, all the things that could go right. But I knew that it was going to be a certain way. And I woke up the morning of the Olympics, and I woke up at 4:30. I get up and we do what we call our neuromuscular wake up. And so we kind of warm up and get ourselves, going. And as I get up, I look out the window, and as I look out the window, it is pouring down rain, like monsoon style rain. The skies are black, and there's 6 inches of water on the concrete. And I looked out there and I thought, perfect. This is exactly what I should have expected, even though I didn't, because I knew it was going to be this beautiful day. And I was just like, bad attitude. And I was like, this is going to suck. And I'm just not looking forward to it. And now this is going to make everything even harder. And, I just had a terrible attitude, but I got my clothes on, went out, did my neuromuscular workup, got back to the hotel or the room that we were staying at, went to the track, and I was sitting under these big tents on the warm-up track at about 7 a.m. and we started running at 9. And it looked like it was about, I don't know, 6 or 7 p.m. at night. I mean, it was dark. In fact, I have a picture that's not in my room here, but I have a picture of me on the track kneeling after a race, and you can see the water on the track and the raindrops hitting, and it's, reflecting the lights from the stadium lights that are shining down on it. And everybody always asks, oh, was that the 1,500 meters or the 400 meters? Because it looks like it's at night, like in the middle of the night. And I say, no, that was actually the 100 meters, which is the very first event at 9 a.m. in the morning. I mean, it was absolutely horrible. You've never seen so much rain come down in your entire life. But I'm sitting under this tent, and it's dark out. I've got my earphones in. I'm listening to music, and I've got this bad attitude. And one by one, I see my other competitors walk out. And they come out to the track, and they all do the same thing. They all look, and they're like throwing up their hands, and they're talking to their coaches, and they're just mad, and they're frustrated, and they're angry because this day didn't turn out the way that we had all imagined. And it dawned on me, and I said, you know what? I said, I've done this many times. I've trained in the rain before, but I realized at that moment that I had an opportunity, right? It wasn't exactly what I wanted. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be fun. In fact, it probably made things as hard as they could possibly be for us. But it dawned on me that I had an opportunity at that moment. And that opportunity was I could change my perspective. I could change my attitude, and I could go into this, and I could attack it and give it everything I had. Or I could continue to sit here and sulk, and I could continue to look at myself as a victim, and I could continue to look at myself as, in my situation and say, this isn't fair. Everybody else had sunny and this and this and this. I could do that, or I could go out and I could just say, it is what it is, and make the best of it. And so at that moment, I had to make a choice, and I made the choice to make the best of it. And I knew at that moment that everybody else I was competing against, I knew that I had already had them beat. And I told that to my coaches. I said, these guys have no chance. And this was at the warm up before we even started the competition. I just knew, because of the look and the way that they were acting before the meet, I knew that they were going to go into this with the worst attitude possible. And that because I could change my attitude, I was going to come out on top. And so I just say that because, I think it parallels my story in general. Again, it's very easy for me to look at my life and think, I was a victim of circumstance. I was a victim of this. It shouldn't have worked out for me. This was too hard. People said I wasn't going to make it. I had all these things going against me. In fact, the odds of me winning the Olympic gold medal, when I looked it up on Google, this is a Google stat, not my stat, and I'm not a mathematician, so please don't tell Mandy that I was off on my math. They said the odds of me winning were 22 million to 1. You throw in, and that's without all the backstory that I shared with you before that. So you throw in all that backstory, and it's like, statistically, like, I should never have been able to win the gold medal. But I think, when you get to a point in life that I did, and you've got yourself surrounded by good people, you can take those experiences, you can take all the things that were going on, and you can change that direction. You can move into a brighter and bigger and better future if you're willing to change your attitude, if you're willing to not see yourself as a victim and see the hurdles and the setbacks and those types of things as opportunities to overcome, and opportunities to learn, and to build character, and to do all those types of things. And all of that has allowed me to be who I am today, and be able to sit here and share with you guys. And I'm so thankful for it. And so anyways, all that to say, that's kind of my story. That's a bit of my experience. I could sit all day and talk about Olympic stories and all kinds of stuff. But I want to make sure that you guys have an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. So hopefully find that a little encouraging, and I appreciate your time.
Awesome. Bryan, this is sign language for round of applause. So we're
Nice.
giving you a round of applause, not just
Thank
being
you.
crazy people. We'll let folks, if you want to raise your hand using the Zoom feature, or you can chat a note in, or put a note in the chat window as well. But I think, Sean, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Bryan. That was amazing. I love that. And I could probably listen to you for 3 or 4 more hours. That was so cool. I guess my question is, I have 30,000 questions, but one I want to ask, so you won a silver medal,
Mm-hmm.
and then 4 years later you won a gold medal, right?
Yeah.
So what changed, or what did you do? How did you adjust from getting the silver to the gold in that 4 years?
Yeah, listen, I think that's a question that I get a lot. And I think I think what people think is that you change a whole bunch of stuff to make that leap. And really, the only thing that changed in me was my belief that I could actually win the gold medal. Okay. Honestly, like if you look at what we do, and Mandy can attest to this, like, running is running. Like, you go out, you run, the workouts are kind of the same. Every week we know on Wednesdays we're going to do this, and on Thursdays we're going to do this, and on Fridays we're going to do this. I mean, we have a plan. I had a 4-year plan. I could tell you 4 years in advance where I was going to be, what I was going to feel like, how much weight I was going to lift. So there was all of that, the basics, but very little of that changes unless something happens and you have to adapt that plan. For the most part, it just stays the same. And so my training didn't change from the silver medal to the gold medal. What changed is when I won the silver medal, I actually saw myself as one of the best in the world. I actually believed that I could be one of the best in the world. And so I trained with that mentality. I trained with the mentality that I was the best in the world. And then if I executed everything that I knew I was capable of doing, that I was going to come out on top. And so it was just a matter of execution. That is it. And that takes all of the unknown out of it. When you can get rid of the unknown, everything becomes familiar. And when things become familiar, it's easy to just drop into your routine and just execute. And you just execute. And those are the little tricks that you learn as you start to kind of get into these really elite levels of kind of competition. And that's why you'll hear a lot of elite athletes say, it's 90% mental, 10% physical, or, they'll give you some little breakdown of this idea that it really becomes this mental thing. Everybody at the Olympics is capable of winning. an Olympic gold medal. They're all phenomenal athletes. They all trained their entire lives to get there. They all, have mastered the skills, but it's the ones that can make the least amount of mistakes, that can find their routine, find that sweet spot or that zone, and then just execute and just make it happen. And I was able to do that.
Awesome, man. Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you
no
for
problem.
sharing. That was cool.
Bryan, we had another question in the chat window from Taya, who wanted to know, how do you deal with your anger now that you're sort of through the tough time, or how have you managed that as an adult?
Okay. Who's Taya? I don't see her. Is she, oh, there you are. You're right in the middle. Perfect. Okay. So I appreciate the question. I think one of the things that I had to do in order to kind of start managing my anger is just understand that there are different types of emotions. And I had to allow myself to go in and settle into different kinds of emotions and talk through that and feel that out and do some thinking in that. And so creating space in those other emotions where I could settle in and feel. But I'll be real honest with you. I still struggle with my anger. It is something that I don't know if it's just because I was born hot-blooded or what, but it was like I still struggle with it. And so sometimes, my kids catch the wrath of that, and sometimes my wife catches the wrath of that, and sometimes my business partners catch the wrath of that. And while I'm not out physically, acting on my anger, I still will snap and kind of lose my temper when I'm backed into a corner, or when I feel frustrated and I don't know where else to do. But I think slowing down, allowing myself and giving myself space in those different areas, walking through some of those areas in counseling. I was a social work major, and so a lot of the ways that I worked through all of those types of things, emotions and feelings, were when I was kind of medicating, when I was like talking to myself and reading about all these different cases and then having to walk myself through, okay, what is the common sense thing to do here? What's the logical thing to do here? What makes sense? What doesn't make sense? And then I have to write papers on that and kind of explain my ideas and my theories through that. And that kind of helped me work through some of these things. And then the other thing is just age. I think as you get older, you start to have kids. For me, my faith plays a big part of who I am and what and how I operate. And so learning more and having more experience and those types of things, those things change you and they mold you and they make you into a different person. And so, I think being open to all of that stuff and allowing all of those things to speak to me and to help make me a better person is kind of how I've dealt with it, most of it. But I am far from perfect. So I screw up all the time.
But have you bitten anyone in the cheek since kindergarten?
I have not. I've stopped doing that. But yeah, I actually had a kid, believe it or not, who I ran into who remembered that. And actually came up to me and said, "I remember you. You were that guy that bit people on the cheek in kindergarten." And I was like, I didn't even know what to say. I was just like, "I'm so sorry." I don't know what to tell you, but yeah, I kind of hopefully have graduated from that.
Yeah. That we have a couple more questions. One question I'd love for you to answer too, Bryan. It's not easy to tell on a computer screen, but you are somewhat small in stature by comparison to your competitors and other Olympic decathletes. We as a state, Wyoming, are a little bit small in stature as a population in a lot of rural communities. And sometimes it feels hard to compare ourselves to big cities or places with a lot of resources or a lot of companies and things that would make, life easier in some ways for us. How did you work your own mental approach through being kind of the little guy on the track, and how did you use that to your advantage, if you could?
Yeah, so I think, the way that so I'm 5'10". Most of my competitors are 6'2" to 6'5". Some of them are 6'6". They're like, these European kind of Greek gods, they're just massive, individuals, and they're super athletic and just chiseled. And I'm this short little, half Japanese, half black guy that's kind of stocky. And and I'd show up on the track and the TV camera would kind of pan across, looking at everybody in their lanes, and then it would drop down to me, and then it would pan back up and then finish going. And then, not just that, but I also went to a very small school. And so I've been ignored my entire career. People looked at me when I was coming out of high school and thought, you came from a small state, Hawaii, not going to be great. Not known for track and field or any of those types of things. He's too small for the decathlon. He went to an NAIA school, which, you know, it was the total wrong decision, you know, in their minds. And so all throughout my career, all throughout my life, I was the underdog. In fact, a buddy of mine wrote a whole commercial kind of piece, script about being the underdog. But for me, being the underdog was actually something that I think worked to my advantage. And what I mean by that is having to fight and kind of figure things out in Hawaii. I had to prove that I was, you know, good enough to get into schools. I had to use the struggles and use the fact that I was from this small state to be able to stand out to everyone else. And so I did that. And then I got into college and I went to a small college, and I had to fight there to kind of catapult myself to the front of everyone's conversations when it came down to collegiate rankings and those types of things, because they don't usually rank NAIA schools athletes. They rank just the division 1, 2, and 3 athletes. And so it was always this fight to have to prove, but what that did was it built this mental toughness in me. It built this grit in me. And I had to do certain things to make myself be able to compete with the guys that had a larger wingspan than I did, or higher reach, or higher center of gravity for events like the high jump. I had to become a technician. And so I focused on all the little things. And so people often ask me, you know, what advice do you have? And sometimes the advice that I give, depending on the group that I'm talking to, is, you know, there's this idea of, people say, don't sweat the small stuff. And for me, I sweated the small stuff all the time. I was the first one to the track. I did everything I was supposed to do. When everybody was doing all their other stuff, I was doing everything with intention. I was trying to make sure that I got it exactly the way it was supposed to be. I was the last one to leave the track every day. And because of that grit and the fight that I had to have, it gave me that drive to want to be the best. And it made me fearless when it came to hard work and a little bit of, like, you know, adversity. And so I was able to use that hard work ethic and that perfectionism and that drive and that little bit of a chip on my shoulder to become the best in the world. And so that's kind of how I did it. You know, I wish there was a real fancy answer for you, but that's really the truth. It became the fuel that I had to prove to everyone that I was you know, good enough. And when I won the gold medal, it was, you know, I was able to look, you know, this is going to sound really bad, but I was able to look down at everyone from the top of the podium, is what I'm meaning. And I was able to know that I actually did it. And I did it without compromising who I was, what I stood for, what I believed to be true and right. And there's very little that can compare to the satisfaction that you feel when you're able to look back on, you know, a good portion of your life and feel like you did a good job, that you did it without compromise. And I was able to do that. And that was a huge blessing for me.
Bryan, I'll ask a question and you can either give a short answer or a more detailed answer.
Okay.
Watching you go through those 4 years between your silver medal and your gold medal, you did have to make some hard decisions that took a bit of character and some integrity when it came to your sponsors and what you represented. And, you know, sometimes I think we can get in this mentality of win at all costs and that, you know, the end is worth the means. Mm-hmm. And can you share a little bit of how you kept a sense of yourself in that time, or how you made some of those harder decisions when it maybe would have been easier to take the low road and on the way? Yeah.
So I'll share a quick story. So I was, when I was competing, I remember I had a PR marketing firm come up to me and they said, listen, you know, as you're getting ready to compete here, you need to decide, are you going to be Bryan Clay, the world's greatest athlete, or are you going to be Bryan Clay, the Christian? And they said, you've got to pick a path. They're two very different paths and you've got to pick one. And you know, we can't do both. And at the time I was just naive enough to think that I could prove them wrong and I could be Bryan Clay, the Christian that was still the world's greatest athlete. But as I got into, and that's the path that I chose, but as I got into sport, I realized what they were talking about. And what you see in the world, I guess the easiest example for me to explain is one of my Olympic family members, Olympians out there, who goes by the name of Caitlyn Jenner now, who's a great friend of mine, and we still stay in touch today. But at the time that I knew her, he was Bruce Jenner. And Bruce and I are great friends, and we've had a great relationship over the years, even through his transition and all the things that he's got going on in his life. But I bring up Bruce because I think it's very easy to go one path and take a path where you really, your life and the things that you do start to look differently. And I'm not just talking about Bruce or Caitlyn, but I'm talking about his family in general. I know them, and I know there are decisions that they've made individually that they maybe would do differently if they could go back and redo them. And for me, I had to decide, was I going to go down the path of fame, fortune, potentially make some bad decisions that were going to take me down and take me into places that I knew I shouldn't be? Or was I going to try to steer clear from all of that? And was I going to try to be, hang on to my values, to my morals, and to the things that I believe to be right? And when you get into our world and you start to do well, what everybody, doesn't experience is we live in a world where everything becomes permissible. Everything. I could share story after story after story with you when I was traveling the world, when I was in Russia or the Czech Republic or in France or in any of these countries that we travel to, where I could literally do anything. I could get away with whatever I wanted and nobody would know, nobody would look bad at me. And in fact, it was at my fingertips. I had people giving it to me saying, here, tell me, we can do this, we'll do this, we'll do this, you can have this, you can have this. And it is really, really difficult. And so the way that I got through that for me, and this is just my personal walk, is I had to have a foundation that was anchored to something. And that foundation for me was my faith, of course, but what that did was it gave me this anchor point that never allowed me, this tether that never allowed me to get too far away from the center, from who I saw myself as and who I was. And that's what my faith allowed in my life. And it's allowed me to maintain relationships with people and kind of interact with the world without getting, like I said, off track or too far away from where I would personally, think that I need to be. And so that's what helped me, Mandy. Like, there were opportunities to take steroids. There were opportunities to do things that I, would definitely regret now. I was married when I was competing. And so there were opportunities in that area where I could have been unfaithful to my wife. I had kids. I mean, there were all kinds of things. And that's kind of what I did. One other thing that I would share is I never trusted myself to be alone. And so, Mandy, I don't know if you know this, but I traveled with a team of people, not just Kevin, but I surrounded myself with people that knew and were committed to helping me maintain my standard of morals and values and those types of things. And so their job was to smack me and keep me in line and say no. Their job was to be there when I was feeling tempted to go and do something that I shouldn't do, to be there to say, hey, you don't need to go with the guys, chill with us, like we'll hang with you, let's go do something different. And so I literally didn't travel anywhere by myself. I took my group of people with me anywhere. I'm not joking you. Like, it was something that I believed in so wholeheartedly that I had a meet in Jamaica, and I couldn't. There was nobody that could go with me. My coach couldn't go. My wife couldn't go. I didn't have any friends that could go. They were all stuck. And so I literally called my pastor and said, "Hey, do you want a free trip to Jamaica?" And I bought him a ticket, and I flew my pastor to Jamaica with me, and he hung out with me in Jamaica while I competed. That's not because of anything, and I'm not trying to force my faith on anyone, but it's because I literally just didn't trust myself. I know myself enough to know that trying to stand alone gets really, really tough sometimes. And I needed people in my life that could kind of surround me and make sure that, I had someone else there to kind of help hold me up when I needed it. So yeah, those are kind of some of the ways that I was able to do that. Hopefully that answered. If not, ask me some other question and I'll try to answer it a little differently.
That's awesome. Thanks, Bryan. And we're getting close on time. So I think I'll end with a question from Joe, who, back to your quote, wants to know, what do you do now that you feel God's pleasure? Is it still running the 1500? I'm sure of it.
No, it doesn't have anything to do with working out at all. No, so one of the things that I love is the platform that I've been given. When I woke up the morning after the Beijing Olympics, I remember kind of waking up in this hotel room, and I kind of, I went through my normal routine, which is you start by wiggling your toes, and you wait to see how bad that hurts, right? And then you kind of move your ankles, and then if that feels okay, you might bend a knee and start to move, but you literally wake up feeling like you were just in a car accident. So I was going through this routine, and as I was kind of opening my eyes, and I'm in this stark white room with these white curtains that the light was shining through and kind of blowing in the wind, I think to myself, oh my gosh, I had the craziest dream. I just won the Olympic gold medal. Like, that was amazing. And as I kind of come to and realize where I am, I'm like, oh crap. And I look over, and on my nightstand is my, my Olympic medal, my gold medal. And it's sitting there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I actually did it. Like, I won, it's kind of cool. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I just wanted to go to the window and just yell, like, I did it, and I got to the window, and I'm looking out the window, and the bikes are going by, like the bicycles, because in China, they just had, hundreds of thousands of bikes that would just go by, and taxi cabs that were just driving, and it was just chaos and people and everything. And it dawned on me that nobody really cared. Right. I literally was standing in this window with it open, and I wanted to be like, guys, look at me. Like, I did it, and I just realized, like, I could literally yell at the top of my lungs and no one would care. And it was this very sobering reality that while this is cool, there had to be more meaning behind trying to accomplish this. And that life really, there are more important things in life, and life goes on. The world doesn't stop just because I won, my Olympic gold medal, or I made my dream come true. And so I spent some time really searching and trying to understand, I would ask myself, is there someone out there in this world that deserved these types of blessings more than me? Because that's what this is. It's a blessing. It's a gift. I don't deserve this. It's not my right to have these. And I would always come up with the answer that yes, there are many people that deserve, this good fortune more than I do. There are people out there that have given their lives to taking care of the poor and serving the needy and human rights things. And I mean, there are just people out there that are just angels, that deserve all these good things way more than I do. And that caused me to really have to try to ask some questions. If that's the case, if there are people out there that deserve it more than me, then why me? Like, why did I get it? And so again, I say this, not to force this on anybody, but this is just, where I'm at as an individual. I believe in the Bible, there's this story about stones of remembrance, and when events would happen in the Bible, somebody would take, and maybe not even the Bible, just in the Bible times, they would take these stones and they would stack these stones next to the riverside or next to like somewhere where this event would happen, and they would stack all these stones, and in one of the stories, they ask, why are you stacking the stones? And one of the individuals says, we stack these stones because when we're asked what that stone right there stands for, I can speak to the faithfulness that God has had in our life at that point in time, in that moment. And so for me, what my gold medal and my silver medal and my book and the opportunities and just the good fortune and the blessings that I've been so lucky to have in my life, what those stand for and the reason why I do what I do is because I see them as my stones of remembrance. And so when people ask, how did you do that? When people ask, what were you thinking? What was it going through? What was it like? It's an opportunity for me to share about the faithfulness that God has had in my life. Because I will tell you right now, none of this was done just by myself, under my own strength. Sharing my story and telling you guys about all the things, I share that because I want you to know that it wasn't because of me. I have been blessed beyond what I could ever ask for. I've had people placed in my life that are good people that I could never in a million years imagined. I've got a wife that has been an absolute rock in my life and has just kept me completely grounded and is really the one who holds it all together. You know, those are the reasons why I've been able to do what I've been able to do. Those are the reasons why I have what I have. And so as I go out, what I try to do is I try to do exactly that. I try to just share my story, let people take from it what they want and not take what they want, but it's an opportunity for me to share. And when I do that, I do feel like God is looking down on me and he's saying, hey, listen, good job. You're doing the things that I wanted you to do. And hopefully I can do that with love and with encouragement in a way that draws people in closer as opposed to pushes them away. And I think there's some wisdom and skill in being able to do that. But it's, I think, the opportunity that I've been given, and I've just been trying to do the best job I can.
Awesome. Okay, another round of applause for Bryan.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. That was awesome. And I think Bryan is